Students around the country are stepping out of class for 17 minutes to mark the 1-month anniversary of the mass shooting at a school in Parkland, Florida. What do Americans think about that? Should they be punished? And are they changing the discussion about guns in America in a positive way? We have new numbers on that and on whether people want their kids to grow up to be president. Well, who wouldn't? You might be surprised. And hi, everybody. This is Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Marigoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
1 month after the shooting at the high school in Parkland, Florida, it is National Student Walkout Day on the 14th, on Wednesday. They're going to walk, students all over the country, in many places, are going to walk out of class for 17 minutes for the 17 people who were killed there. We have asked some questions about this, specifically around a kind of pervasive notion in some parts of the media that the students are somehow, students all over the country are somehow outside of what they should be doing by acting the way they are, by speaking the way they are. And so we wanted to find out what most Americans think about that. What did we find?
Well, we found certainly, I think that the students are, having a dent and making an impact in whether on this particular event that is coming up tomorrow. The question of whether these students who walk out of class, should they be punished? Should there be disciplinary action taken at the school? 72% of Americans say no. Only 22% say yes, they should be punished. So I think it's fair to conclude that the students do have their backs of the public.
For this event.
For this event, absolutely.
And that crosses all the demographic groups. I mean, that's also a little surprising.
I mean, well, yes and no, but because we actually asked this question, obviously in the context of the walkout and the students, voicing their opinions on gun laws and gun violence. And I think what is interesting is, the reason why we see such support across a lot of, party lines as well as gun owners. We see
everybody above 50%. 58% gun owners,
exactly.
53 Republicans, 53% Trump supporters.
Including Trump supporters.
I think this is also perceived not just in the context of a debate on guns, but also as free speech, a right to protest. Mm-hmm. And I think that Americans, of all stripes, do respect that right to speak one's mind and to also actively partake. And so most Americans pretty much are saying that the schools should not punish students. There should not be disciplinary action if they walk out for this time, not only to have us all reflect upon gun violence, but also to think about the people who have been killed.
And I think this is all part of a broader issue that we're dealing with in American politics, to the degree that our national political system is not held in high esteem, which has been going on for quite some time. The flip side of that is we see when people feel that they're not in power, there's increasing mobilization. So when the Democrats had the White House with President Obama, the Tea Party movement emerged, and this kind of like this anger and the backlash set in. And now with the
but also a mobilization,
mobilization
on a number of issues,
which may have in fact carried the President Trump into office. And now when we see with the Republicans in control, well, we're seeing the women's movement, the Me Too thing becoming so vital to many people. And then also now the mobilization of the students in the aftermath of this tragedy. Again, mobilization as a strong backlash reaction to a perception that things just aren't going well in Washington.
So are they going to make a difference? I mean, that's one of the things I hear just when I'm talking to people, and they ask me as a political reporter for a long time. I always get asked, well, what do you think's going to happen? What do you And my experience, I think all of our experience with regards to the issue of guns is that no matter what the incident, There have, after Columbine was the only time that there was some action taken that seemed to have stuck for at least a short period of time. But generally, things don't change. And I continually am asked, but is it different this time? Have these kids changed the narrative? Have they injected themselves in such a way that they're disarming the NRA's arguments?
Yeah, well, I think, as you say, it's a time of mobilization. I think they're also focusing on the midterm elections, which gives a target to this. In the 2 polls we've done about this, the students, we see that their impact, people who think they've had an impact, has remained fairly steady in the month. So we're not seeing it dissipate. Clearly, that's a short time period.
And what are the numbers? What are we seeing there?
What we see is about a third of Americans believe that the students are actually having a major impact on gun reform. The plurality, 44%, think they're having some or a minor impact, and only 1 in 5, 19%, don't think that they're having any impact at all. And that's been consistent over the past
with
month.
The 2 polls. So the no impact at all has stayed about 1 in 5, and other people think it's minor.
And about 3 and 4 have said there's some impact.
Which, as you point out, Jay, I think is quite striking, because even after Newtown, where we had the event at the elementary school, a month later, we were really seeing people back in their respective corners on the issue, and the issue itself had pretty much minimized in the public dialogue. So I think this time has been different. Whether it continues and there are actually tangible changes that occur, I think that still remains to be seen.
It strikes me this is a little bit like you're teaching class in 1968 this semester here at Marist College, Lee. And one of the things, 1968, this pivotal year, incredible year that changed politics, changed America in so many ways. One of the things that happens there is that Walter Cronkite, who has a place in American society that no longer exists.
Most trusted man in America.
Right. And as a journalist, as an anchor of a network news, and he basically comes back from Vietnam and says, this isn't winnable. And that changes. It's not the only thing, but it is that paradigm shift. I wonder if that is similar to this. And the paradigm shift I'm thinking of here is that these kids understand social media and the way that we gain information and influence people at least as well as Donald Trump does. And he's pretty good at that. And better than the NRA, better than people who are on that side of the gun debate. Do you think, in looking back to 6-8, and you spent a lot of time on it, is this similar to that?
It may be a comparable moment, and putting it in those terms is actually quite interesting, because that obviously period back then did have a lasting effect, and we're talking about it 50 years later. I think it's also when we see how this has penetrated the American psyche. We're seeing corporations who've had package deals with the NRA now have backed off that.
That's what I'm getting at, though. Is these kinds of things didn't happen before. And in the same way that Cronkite comes back and says, this isn't winnable, and the dominoes, so to speak, different dominoes, begin to fall.
The other way.
This strikes me as potentially dominoes falling that have never fallen before.
And we're seeing legislators in some of the states, in Florida, most recently now, looking at and passing some revision of some of the laws
in Florida,
because there's a sense that you don't want to be advertising your NRA contribution right now going into the midterm elections. You may want to have been able to say something which is unusual to this event, to say, well, in fact, I've got some things that I want to do to limit guns. And I think that's the change.
Although, we did ask about that as well, and whether, people would be positive or negative about a brand or company who changed their relationship.
And this is one time when you get really surprised by the response.
Whether they changed their relationship with the NRA. And I think what we saw there is it's still an incredibly polarizing issue. So 40% of Americans thought that they would be more likely to support and favor a brand that severed their ties, and 37%, said the opposite. So we do see that significant polarization. But I think what is different is that we are continuing to have this public debate and this dialogue. How long it lasts, I'm not sure. I think there is consensus, as many polls, not just ours, has shown. There's consensus certainly on background checks, on age restrictions, and so and even to some degree on assault weapons. So I think that there's an awareness. There's now a discussion, and perhaps that's the greatest thing that these students have provided.
And it's actually a perfect segue into another poll that we've done, another question we've asked. Because these kids, Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, Cameron Kasky, these kids from Parkland, one of the complaints about them is that they are, involving themselves in politics. And I think part of the reason they're having an impact is they're so good at what they're doing, making their case in a logical way. They do kind of seem like young politicians in some ways. Whether they will someday run for office and become the next president of the United States, who knows? But we have been asking parents whether they even want their kids to be president. And you'd think, oh, yeah, everybody wants their kid to be president.
No.
Not so much.
Not so much. 54% say they do not want their child or grandchild to grow up to become president of the United States. And what I found interesting in that is, well, first, on the one hand, it's a majority say no, but that the number hasn't increased. I was sort of expecting that with all that's gone on in the last decade, that people would be even more turned off, but we found the number was 53 in 2007. So the good news is the numbers haven't gotten any worse. The bad news is people are not enthusiastic about their child
and
or
what I
grandchild
found
to
interesting
become
is
president.
it's mostly women that really don't want their children to get involved in politics, and I'm not quite sure, why. I mean, it does certainly burden people. We'll see if President Trump is going to, change this in the future. But most people look a lot older when they leave office, even more so than the 4 or 8 years that have transpired.
So do pollsters who are polling on all these people.
Oh,
So
you look the same as you did when the poll started in 1978, not a day older than that.
Way
What's
too
interesting?
kind. Way
What
too
would be
kind.
an interesting way to look at this is the next time we ask, daughter and son. It would be interesting to see, do you think, would you like to see your son as president? Would you like to, if you have a daughter, would you like to see your daughter or granddaughter as president? See if there's a divide there.
To see whether that's part of the
Yeah.
elevation of women in our society and the movement that's going on currently.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Indeed.
But what is surprising is that over time, from 2007, is that we find, although there hasn't been much change in whether people think they want their kids to become president, they think the reason why people run for president is actually mostly to serve the public. Now, 39%, up from 32%, now say that people actually have the public good in mind when they do run for president. And I think that change was something that is surprising to me. And although a majority still think that people do it for personal ambition, it's barely a majority, only 51%. And that's down from 58 when we saw that in 2007.
And that's kind of a surprise, because if you think about politics has gotten, if anything, as politics has become entertainment and as we have 24/7 cable that covers just politics, it seems that it has further illuminated those qualities in all of these politicians who rush to get in front of the cameras. It seems to have highlighted those qualities of what appear to be self kind of promotion over doing the greater good. Not that there is an actual difference, but our media culture seems to have highlighted that more than anything
Well,
else.
it gets back to these high school students, and maybe the winds of change are back, blowing in the air, and maybe we are seeing some attitudes that are starting to shift now, coming out of this long, incredible polarization and cynicism that we've been going through.
Well,
Don't hold your breath, though,
not holding
Lee.
my
No, but there is the argument
I'm
that
hopeful.
millennials, and I know we try and stay away from broadly categorizing millennials as blah, they do this, they do that. But there is the general characterization that people don't argue with too much, that millennials do seem to have a different sense of duty in society than the prior couple of generations may have. A little bit less self-centered, a little bit more on the larger picture.
And a little more tolerant than the society that they grew up in.
Right, and a lot more tolerant. So maybe that comes out as we continue to ask about this in the future. Maybe you begin to see more of parents of the next generation, for instance, saying, yeah, I would like to see my kids do that. And yeah, I do think politicians are doing it for the right reason.
And hopefully that'll become real news.
That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. We want to thank our executive producer, Mary Griffith.
And you notice that in our discussions, we refer to things of the past as well as the present. Well, that's because of the Roper Center Archives at Cornell University, who provide the ability to look back over time at survey questions and results decade ago. So that's a great thing. I'm on the board there, so I do want to, in the interest of disclosure, point that out. But we also like to hear from you. So send your questions to pollhub@marist.edu. You can also tweet us. We read everything. Some of it makes it on the air, too.
And some of it doesn't. As is the case of all social media, you can find us on Twitter @MaristPoll. And as Lee said, tweet right at us. And if you use nice language and ask a legitimate question, we're happy to answer. Marist Poll on Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. We are everywhere you are. And remember, you can shout at your smart speaker. Smart speaker? That's a whole new product. Your smart speaker, say, hey, Alexa, play Poll Hub. And if she is cooperating today, she will play the latest episode of Poll Hub. And don't forget, wherever you're listening to this, there is a subscribe button. Tap it. We'd love to have you subscribe. That way you get to find out the latest episode every time it's released, and you'll be up to date on everything having to do with polls. Have a great week, everybody.